Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dosing. Well, right now things aren't exactly looking too good for Xbox's biggest acquisition, the buyout that they convinced Microsoft to pledge $70 billion for. Yes, Activision seems to be on edge right now, and with that, I imagine Xbox's leadership is probably also on edge because, well, Microsoft likely isn't too thrilled with their latest results. So we're going to get into all of that and also a new discovery for the Game Awards and the rising cost for developers to actually make an appearance there. This has been highly criticized online, but I'll be honest here, not exactly all that surprised. If anything, I think this is just one of the reasons that Jeff Keighley's showcases tend to be a little bit underwhelming. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with Nintendo because they just revealed 2 new games for their Switch Online subscription. You know, there's been a lot of Nintendo 64 news here in the past month with Analog and Mod Retro's new FPGA Nintendo 64 consoles, but lo and behold, Nintendo still has their own subscription service as well, and, I mean, as long as you don't mind software emulation, then Switch Online is still a pretty good option to have. And plus, it's also one of the most accessible ways to play Nintendo 64 games. Well, now, Rayman 2 and Tonic Trouble will arrive on December 17th. Now, I can't necessarily speak for Tonic, I haven't played that game, but Rayman 2, on the other hand, it is often viewed as an all-time great 3D platformer. And while the Nintendo 64 might not necessarily be the best way to play it, it is still a good game, all things considered. Plus, I also think that it could be a really good precursor to have for the eventual Rayman that's currently in development over at Ubisoft. So if you have Switch Online Plus expansion pack, definitely go check it out come December 17th. And speaking of platformers, one of my favorite games this generation is Hi-Fi Rush. I love the creativity, its art style, its personality, and really just pretty much everything about it. I mean, it's still crazy to me that Xbox let this IP and its studio go. I to this day believe that that was a mistake. But here we are a year plus later, and they posted a big update today which revealed that not only is it 40% off on Steam, definitely go check it out if you haven't already, but also they teased some big news. They said that something that you can actually hold is on the way. In other words, a physical version. Now, before Hi-Fi Rush and the studio got sold off, Xbox was originally in partnership with Limited Run Games to produce a physical copy. However, that just never came to be for obvious reasons, and a lot of fans just kind of gave up hope that it would ever end up happening. Thankfully, though, it seems like they figured something out. Now, will this new physical version be with Limited Run Games or maybe somebody else? Now, that still remains to be seen, but either which way, I'm glad to hear that a physical version will still happen after all. Oh, and we also got an update from Metroid Prime 4 and how it's doing on the market, or at least to some extent, because Christopher Dring revealed that sales of Metroid Prime 4 in the UK was 15% down over Metroid Dread physical sales only. It's relatively marginal, just a few thousand units. And all of that extra context is actually very important in this case because I've already seen a lot of people overreact to this news. You know, the doom and gloom, Metroid Prime 4 flopped and this, that, and the other. But context does matter, and I think we all know that the digital versus physical split has increased since the release of Metroid Dread in favor of digital. So a few thousand unit difference in only physical retail really isn't that big of a deal when you start to think about it. Now, to be completely fair, Metroid has never been a big-time seller, but Metroid Dread did do very well. It was the fastest selling Metroid with nearly 3 million units sold in just its first few months after its launch. Now, unfortunately, Nintendo never gave us another update, so it's kind of hard to say where it ended up. But I think for Metroid Prime 4, the hope is to hear something similar from Nintendo during their next financial report. I think that'll be the best place to get a more direct and accurate comparison of the two. Until then, though, I really wouldn't look too much into this report specifically. Quite honestly, I don't think that it really tells us much of anything, but I saw people freaking out about it online, so I thought we would at least talk about it. That way I can somewhat douse the fire, if you will. All right, now let's just go talk about Xbox and really the sticky situation that they find themselves in because of Activision. I mean, you have to remember that Xbox sold the idea of Activision to Microsoft's upper management, and that's why they went out to acquire them, more specifically because of franchises like Call of Duty. They acquired Activision with the idea that Call of Duty would continue to be the dominant market leader that it's been for more than a decade. However, these past 2 years, which is the first 2 years of their new partnership, Microsoft hasn't exactly been overly pleased with the results of Call of Duty. And the thing is that earlier this year, we talked about a report that Activision believed that Call of Duty is quote-unquote too big to fail. Now, that was in response to the potential of Battlefield's increased competition. And as soon as I heard Activision say that, or at least from that report, I immediately thought to myself, that's not a good sign. To me, what that says is that Activision isn't prioritizing quality or innovation. Instead, they have become completely complacent because they don't think anything else will impact the sales of Call of Duty. They think that whatever they do, it's just going to continue to put up these absolutely dominant numbers. Again, in their words, it's too big to fail. Well, apparently, it seems like their arrogance has kind of come back to bite them because this year's Call of Duty doesn't exactly seem to be performing up to their expectations. Now, the first sign of this was discovered when Black Ops 7 originally launched because it didn't really move the needle on Steam. According to Steam database, it peaked at just 100,000 players, which that's 200,000 players lower than when last year's Call of Duty launched. So even though Call of Duty is a more console-centric franchise, I've talked about that before, but a 200,000 drop on Steam still isn't a great sign. I think no matter how you slice it, that is a big drop-off year over year. Now, to be completely fair, we still don't know the numbers on Xbox and PlayStation, and because this is more of a console-centric franchise, admittedly, things could look much better on those platforms, but that's where today's news comes in. See, Activision posted a big blog post that basically tells fans that they're reevaluating their strategy for Call of Duty going forward. Yeah, they said, our strategy going forward is changing. We will no longer do back-to-back releases of Modern Warfare or Black Ops games. The reasons are many, but the main one is to ensure we provide an absolutely unique experience each and every year. We will drive innovation that is meaningful, not incremental. While we aren't sharing those plans today, we look forward to doing so when the time is right. Now, they also said, to be clear, the future of Call of Duty is very strong, and we believe our best days are ahead of us given the depth and talent of our development teams. We have been building the next era of Call of Duty, and it will deliver precisely on what you want, along with some surprises that push the franchise and the genre forward. We look forward to welcoming you in, listening to you, and moving forward together. And all of that's very pretty words to say. You know, it kind of sounds like they're trying to alleviate any kind of concern that people might have for the future of Call of Duty. But if everything that they said was completely true, then they wouldn't have had to put out this statement in the first place. It very much reads as if Black Ops 7 failed to hit expectations, and because of that, they are now being forced to change their strategy. Now, if they wouldn't have become arrogant, then maybe that wouldn't have had to happen in the first place, but that, to me, is why I will personally say I view this as good news. I've said it 100 times on this channel, and I'll go and say it again here. Competition breeds excellence, and Battlefield brought that competition this year. It's been performing incredibly well, which is something that Activision overlooked because, again, of their arrogance. However, one thing is absolutely for certain. Money makes these companies pay attention. And when players don't show up for their game, well, that's what truly makes them pay attention. It might not feel like it today, but this might actually be the best thing for Call of Duty fans going forward. You know, maybe Activision will actually listen to their fans more going forward. Now, with that said, I do think that this puts Xbox in somewhat of a sticky situation because I'm sure Microsoft isn't exactly too happy about everything that's happening right now. So, if anything, Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond might need to involve themselves with Activision a little bit more and to push them into a better, more consumer-friendly direction. It's kind of the Sony and Bungie situation where Sony had to kind of step in at some point because Bungie just wasn't living up to their expectations. But admittedly, Activision is also a completely different animal with a lot more than just Call of Duty. You know, at the very least, some of their other games are performing well, but I don't know. Those are kind of results for Call of Duty later this month. I think is going to be incredibly interesting. All right, now one more thing before we go, though. The Game Awards will go live tomorrow, so not going to talk about leaks today. Yes, there were a couple more leaks, but for the sake of surprise, I'm not going to talk about those in today's video. However, we did get wind of how much it cost to air a trailer via the Game Awards. And yeah, somehow it actually got even more expensive. Yeah, this was criticized last year, but somehow it actually got even more expensive. Yeah, this comes from Kotaku, where they said, according to two sources familiar with this year's show, a 60-second trailer during the 2025 ceremony can cost up to $450,000. A 3-minute trailer costs over $1 million. Two separate sources in the video game publishing world said that while they had not been briefed on this year's rates, these sounded in line with what they'd expect from previous years. So, yeah. Jeff Keighley is making bank with these showcases. I mean, these rates are pretty crazy, which is almost kind of amusing just because the Game Awards often positions itself as this friendly place for game developers. On the contrary, I think that these rates are what keeps a lot of interesting games from showing up. I mean, certain developers just can't afford this. And then for the publishers, well, a lot of them actually now have their own showcases, and this is one of the exact reasons why. It's just cheaper for them to do their own event. Now, with that said, the Game Awards is still the most viewed showcase of the year, so for certain games, it might be worthwhile to put their marketing budget towards the Game Awards, because it's an immediate way to ensure millions upon millions of views. So that's why Sony, as one such example, might showcase one of their games, but maybe not necessarily their entire lineup. What I will say, though, is that for smaller developers that just, want to get their game noticed, well, the Game Awards is certainly one way to do that. But I think my concern with that is that you better be sure that your game stands out, because there's a lot of trailers at the Game Awards, and it's really easy to get lost in the crowd. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you think that these rates are too expensive, or do you think that it's worth it? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.